The worst leader of them all, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The illusion of democracy is very much kept alive. We are being ruled by leaders who claim that they are democratic leaders, and they force us to play along with their games. In fact, many people do so happily.
A Dutch lawmaker confronted Ursula von der Leyen right there in public. What followed was a political explosion that revealed cracks the EU has tried to hide for years. Because when someone finally speaks the words millions quietly say about Brussels, the crisis of trust, the secrecy, the leadership no one chooses, the whole idea of control begins to shake. And make no mistake, this moment wasn't just an argument in a hall. It was a warning that Europe's most powerful figure is no longer beyond challenge.
No one ever voted for Ursula von der Leyen. No one ever voted for her, yet she is one of the most powerful people in Europe, and she's implementing some of the most destructive policies that our continent has ever seen.
She began with the line Brussels fears most. The EU looks like a democracy, sounds like one, advertises itself as one, but the person running it wasn't picked by a single voter she governs. That's the nerve she cut open. Europeans never selected Ursula von der Leyen. Yet they're expected to follow every rule, policy, and regulation she sends out as if it's unquestionable.
Make no mistake, being a dissident now is just as dangerous as it was back then.
And that's why the frustration becomes clear. Ordinary people are paying the costs, losing farms, watching migration rise, and seeing their communities change. All while the top figure in Europe stands on a platform they never had the chance to decide. Call it official procedure if you like, but to millions it feels like authority without approval. She didn't just criticize Ursula's choices, she challenged the whole system that placed Ursula above the public. And once that base is doubted, the entire structure begins to tremble.
And that is what makes modern-day tyranny arguably worse than what we see in the history books.
She didn't warm up slowly. She called the EU a modern form of tyranny, and people agreed faster than Brussels ever expected. Not because Europe has secret squads or brutal police, but because today's control is quieter and more strategic. Old regimes used violence. This one uses smooth speeches, polished talking points, and respectable language to hide pressure. It's the same fist, only covered in velvet.
Our continent has ever seen. Just to give you a few examples, she's the one who introduced the Green Deal, crippling our economy. She's the one.
Her message hit because she named the tactic everyone sees. Dissent isn't crushed with force anymore. It's crushed with labels. Extremist misinformation, threat to democracy. You're not thrown in jail. You're muted, pushed aside, and drowned in red tape. And by saying it clearly, she pulled the cover off a system that punishes not with harsh beatings, but with soft, constant authority that's harder to notice and even tougher to resist.
Our regime uses pretty words to hide their intentions, but they pervert and invert our definitions all the time.
Then she struck the core, the Orwell point, the idea that the EU doesn't just make wrong choices, it changes the meaning of the words used to defend them. And she said it plainly. She accused Brussels of turning reality upside down, calling war peace, censorship safety, and political pressure defending democracy. It's the kind of claim that stays because people already see it happening. Every crisis gets a new slogan. Every limit comes with a noble reason. Every failure is wrapped in moral phrasing that makes disagreement feel unacceptable.
To maintain peace in Europe, we need to go to war with Russia. They say that to protect democracy, we have to ban right-wing parties, and they say that to safeguard freedom of speech, they need to censor disinformation.
And this is where the atmosphere shifted again. She basically said the EU treats language like a tool. Not to explain, but to influence, not to inform, but to soften. Every hard truth gets hidden behind a nicer, cleaner, safer word. Meanwhile, citizens deal with the outcomes those words try to disguise. Higher costs, higher tension, higher uncertainty. By calling it Orwellian, she wasn't exaggerating. She was naming the method. If leaders can shape the language, they shape the debate. And if they shape the debate, they shape the people. That's why her point hit so hard. It revealed the one thing Brussels can't defend, the distance between what it says and what people actually live.
Just like in Orwell's 1984, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
Then she directed the focus onto one person, Ursula von der Leyen, and stripped away the diplomatic politeness. No vague phrases, no institutional talk. She called Ursula exactly what millions across Europe quietly think she represents. The symbol, the figure, the expression of a system that feels elite, disconnected, and out of reach. In one line, she turned the entire EU machine into one human target. And that's why the moment exploded.
Embodiment of that regime in one person in particular. The worst leader of them all, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Because when you stop talking about Brussels and start talking about Ursula, the issue stops being abstract and becomes real. Suddenly the policies have a name. The decisions have a face. The responsibility has a direction. And that was the weak spot she pressed. Ursula isn't just an official. She is, to many, the symbol of everything people feel they can't vote out, can't challenge, and can't avoid. In that moment, the speech stopped being a critique. It became a direct challenge to authority. Once she put Ursula in the center, she unleashed the part Brussels hoped no one would mention aloud. The policy impacts people feel every single day. No theory, no polite wording, just the list of choices that made Ursula the most divisive figure in EU politics.
She's the one who introduced the Green Deal, crippling our economy. She's the one who introduced the Migration Pact, replacing our native population.
She opened with the Green Deal, calling it an economic blow, not because people deny clean energy, but because the rules landed on farmers, drivers, and small businesses with no transition, no pause, and no sense of real-world limits. To many Europeans, it didn't feel like a climate plan. It felt like financial strangling. Then she hit the Migration Pact, describing it as a deal that brings disorder to local towns. While Brussels calls it unity, she tapped into a growing fear that border decisions are made by people who never face the outcome. Schools overcrowded, shelters full, towns overwhelmed, safety questioned.
And now she's attacking our national sovereignty even further by introducing the Rearm Europe program, an 800 billion euro defense fund mostly used for Ukraine, a country that isn't and should never be part of the European Union.
And then she targeted the 800 billion rearm plan, the largest military expansion in EU history. Her criticism was sharp. People can't cover their bills. Inflation is crushing households. Housing is breaking down. Yet Brussels is pouring massive funds into weapons while citizens struggle. The EU is arming at record levels. Then she rejected the idea of Ukraine joining the EU entirely, calling it dangerous. Brussels sells it as unavoidable, but millions see risk, economic, strategic, social. And when she connected all these choices directly to Ursula, it stopped being complaints. It became an accusation.
At least, when are we ever going to see those text messages in which she closed a 35 billion euro deal with Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer?
Then she hit Brussels' most fragile spot. The missing Pfizer texts, a $35 billion deal with no evidence, no record, nothing. And she didn't soften it. How can the EU track every citizen's messages for safety, but Ursula can't find the texts she used to negotiate billions of public funds? That question cracked the room open. Even EU watchdogs admit the deal stinks. Ursula arranged a $35 billion contract through private chats with Pfizer's CEO. And those texts vanished the moment reporters asked for them. The EU demands your data, but its own disappears when the stakes are highest.
Ursula von der Leyen thinks she is untouchable. She thinks she is above the law. But we are here today to remind her that she is not.
That's why this argument landed like a hammer. Citizens face surveillance. Leaders claim selective memory. She turned a quiet Brussels scandal into a direct question. Where are the messages? And once that question was spoken publicly, there was no escape. Then she tied it to the EU's push for chat scanning. And that's when the double standard became undeniable. Brussels wants to search every citizen's private messages for security. Yet the Commission President's messages vanish the second money, power, or accountability appear. If the public must give up privacy, why does Ursula get total secrecy? It's a contradiction so obvious it explains itself.
What you have done. Do you think about the people who suffer because of your policies? Do you think about the people who have died because of the vaccine that you pushed on them, that you bought behind closed doors?
This is when the audience leaned in because she said what no one in Brussels dares to say openly. Europe isn't just debating surveillance, it's normalizing it for ordinary people while shielding elites. And once that conflict is exposed, the whole safety over freedom story collapses. She made it painfully clear. In this system, the watched are the powerless, and the unwatched are the ones holding control.
Think about the cries of the mothers who cry at night because their children were raped or murdered by immigrants that you let in.
She went directly to the human impact. Vaccine injuries ignored, migrant crimes brushed aside, farmers pressured by rules, and families squeezed by rising costs. These weren't theoretical arguments. They were the struggles people face every single day.
I will not stop fighting for them. I will not stop fighting for the truth, and I will not stop fighting for my people. The time of zero accountability will come to an end, and I will promise you, we will make Europe great again.
If you're still watching, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. So the real question is, does Europe wake up now, or is Brussels already too far gone?